What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to The Fringe. I know we got to talk about Alberta again. Everybody gets fed up. Nobody's fed up. We're not fed up. We're not going anywhere on this story. Things have been progressing in Alberta. Danielle Smith has been clapping back. She's been very calculated about how she's putting her hat into the ring with this. Not because she's worried about Alberta speaking forward for itself, but the blowback she would ensue should she decide to be a martyr on the pedestal of Alberta separation. One of Canada's former citizens, I'll say former because it was brief, a channel that I often watch, Stephen Crowder, has been talking about the benefits recently of why Alberta should leave. And I wanted to highlight this today because there's a lot of things in this video. I'm not going to show the whole thing. I'll link the full video down below in the description for you guys to go and watch. It's a fantastic watch, by the way, to watch the entire roughly 19 minutes of Stephen Crowder talking about what is going on in Canada and why it's beneficial for Alberta to exit its abusive relationship with the federal government. I want to highlight a few of those things today because it makes a lot of sense. When you look at the pushback that's coming from other provinces. Now, there are a lot of provinces that have supported what is going on in Alberta. A lot of provinces turning around saying, I support what Alberta's doing. I don't think it's possible. You're going to have reserves to fight with. You're going to have it's not as simple as you think it is. You're just going to keep taking our abuse. Stephen Crowder chimes in very well on all of those fronts. Now, again, I'm not going to show the entire video. We will be stopping at period to talk about the reasons he thinks Alberta would benefit to separate. And the reality of Canada, he really shapes it up nicely here, beyond what I could. Now, I've actually been in contact with Stephen Crowder's people. We're trying to arrange some form of an interview. Hopefully we can make that happen. I would like to see that happen. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'd love to sit down and chat with the Crowder boys. But let's take a look at, nonetheless, as an Albertan, I'd love to sit down with them and kind of point out the real picture. But let's take a look at what Stephen Crowder had to say about what's happening in Canada and why, as a quote on his thumbnail says, Canada, you need to get out now and leave. Let's take a look at what he had to say.
Okay. In Alberta, all references are publicly available. Conservatives won the popular vote by a 2-to-1 margin. Okay. Jeez. 2 days ago, Politico ran this headline: "The quiet threat to Canadian unity isn't Quebec, it's Alberta." And the reason, when I grew up in Quebec, right, Quebec wanted to separate all the time from Canada, and they would have these referendums, but it never really happened. Now they're looking at Alberta, and there was a poll on April 6th as far as how many Albertans would vote for independence. They said if the Liberals won, 30%.
Jeez.
I think that number can get quite a bit higher. If we cut through the fog a little bit and actually get to the reasons that Alberta, I would argue, not should, Albertans, Canadians, and if anyone else wants to have take a sober look at yourself right now, you need to leave Canada.
So, of course, Stephen Crowder is referencing the report we've talked about on this channel a number of times, that pre-election, 30% of Albertans had said, should Mark Carney win last Monday's election, 30% would be prepared to vote for separation, for a referendum. Without a figurehead, without a party leader, without somebody designated to lead the charge. And a lot of people say, it's just hot air, it's not a big deal. This is why I keep saying it's growing. Let's take a look at what Stephen Crowder actually points out here on his reasons and his explanations for those reasons, because again, it points out all of the hypocrisy coming from Ontario, coming from Quebec, saying, you guys aren't going anywhere. You just got to put up with how this goes further down the line. You guys are all just a bunch of MAGA supporters. You're just like Trump. Take a look at this.
Reason number one, okay? That's what Ottawa does not share your values whatsoever. Ottawa, for those who are American, that's basically their equivalent of, Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. It's kind of silly to us Americans, but I get that it matters to you.
Ottawa, what?
Pretty much. So, Carney, he has extensive ties to China and the CCP, beyond the LGBTQ AIP, beyond the crazy taxation, beyond the liberalization of all social, cultural issues and removal of God from your country's town squares. He directly he directly aligns himself with the CCP, ergo your liberal government will. So the CCP, unlike what they tried to accuse the United States elections of being controlled by Russia, remember that? Remember that whole thing? CCP pushed online influence campaigns to get Carney elected. This is verifiable.
This was verifiable because we covered that during the election. Again, Mark Carney asked, what are you doing about this? And he just said, oh, I don't know much about it, and there's not much I can do about it. He never once condemned it. He never once, to my knowledge at least, said, I wish they wouldn't do that. I wish they would. He just said, oh, I don't know anything about it. I don't know what's going on. The problem is that you have a prime minister who wants to increase China's stake in Canada rather than work with America. This is bad for Canadians. It's bad for Albertans. It's bad for everybody all around. Don't forget, we allowed China's military to train on Canadian soil during the Trudeau days alongside Canadians. Why are we doing this? I'm going to let him continue.
They want to narrow relations with the United States, open them up with China. And this is why the left will have to eventually implode. But you have to be the one here. You have to be the one pulling that ripcord, Alberta. It's one thing to say, hey, we have a problem with the United States and, these reciprocal tariffs. It's another thing to say, Donald Trump is a fascist and he doesn't respect human rights. So we're going to align ourselves with China. It's not a moral virtue. That tells you it's about money. And the money, if you track it with Carney, is it's hair-raisingly scary.
Yeah, and under Trudeau, the Chinese military actually trained with the Canadian military.
Yeah.
So there we go. Just before this video gets slapped with misinformation, there's the actual government web address, verifying this. When you talk about, this is about money. And I've said forever, when you talk about the Panama Canal, when you talk about shipping, when you talk about everything that's going on with tariffs, this all ties in to increasing wealth. This is why Mark Carney moves his companies around. This is why he has tax havens. This is all about lining the pockets of friends, government contracts, strengthening relationships with China, and opening up distribution networks to make both countries filthy rich. Always follow the money. Always. Stephen Crowder makes some good points coming up here. I want to get into again. Bear with me here, folks, because I think Stephen Crowder paints a very bold picture as to what Alberta needs.
Reason number 2, Alberta. You guys will have more control over your own destiny and be a more prosperous nation or state. To give you an idea, across all levels, Canadians pay higher income tax and sales tax than Americans. It's unbelievable. To give you an idea, the highest individual tax rates too. In the United States, it kicks in about $626,000. Canada is $246,000.
So we've talked about this before. We've said that this is very beneficial to Canadians. This isn't about becoming 51st state. This is about getting away from government taxation rates and the devastating amount of money that people pay. Pierre Poilievre ran on reducing income tax by 15%. Could you imagine if income tax went down significantly less within Alberta just being its own nation, its own separatist nation, republic, however you want to define it? With the amount of oil that would be cranked out, with us in control of our resources, I'm willing to bet there would be little to no tax because the government would make its money off of revenues. Now, he goes into great detail about that, but I want to get ahead to his reasons that Alberta needs to separate. It's scary to think that this is where we are. Let's continue.
Reason number 3. This brings us to opening up that energy sector. To give you an idea, a lot of Americans don't know this. Alberta accounts for 84% of all oil production. And almost half of all U.S. oil imports are from Alberta. There's a lot of red tape. There's also sometimes you can get crude oil and then it has to be refined and sent back. Wouldn't it be nice to just be able to do business together? Wouldn't it be nice to not have to go through Ottawa, to go back to you guys, to then maybe deal with the states, even though now people like Carney don't want you to because reciprocal tariffs? It would also allow the United States, by the way, to have access to far more oil and energy. and not have to open up new drilling because you guys already have the capabilities. It would be a benefit to the United States. It would be a benefit to Canada. It would also allow us to negotiate other tariffs if they exist. If you're not a state, if you're a state, there would be no tariffs. As far as what industries could reduce the cost of living for Canadians.
This is the biggest point that I've always pushed. And this is where I say that the rest of the country, and when I talk about that, I'm saying the government takes Alberta for granted. The amount of GDP that Alberta brings into this country, with caps, with restrictions, is still the largest in the country. The disrespect being shown by federal Ottawa, by our Canadian government. Again, Mark Carney hasn't chimed in on this because he doesn't care. He claims to be an Alberta boy, but he doesn't want to recognize that Alberta needs to get its products to market. If Alberta had control of this, the wealth would be exponential. And while people sit and say, you know, oh, you guys are just sour that it's the Liberals, it's everything else. No, why are we suffering? Why are we not able to buy groceries? Why are we not able to keep the lights on? Why are we paying astronomical rates and carbon taxes and taxes upon taxes upon taxes? Every time the government wants to live lavishly, we're paying another tax. Why is Alberta suffering when they're sitting on all that potential wealth? That one vote could change it all. Let's keep going.
Just to give you an idea, this weekend, other Canadians don't want you to have your autonomy, Alberta. This is what happens with totalitarian regimes. And when I say totalitarian, I'm talking about the regime that froze truckers' bank accounts. And many of those truckers, by the way, were Albertans. That's a huge part of the industry there in Canada.
Yep.
They froze your bank accounts and seized your assets for speaking out against said regime. And then you have the media in Canada that condemns you who voted for conservative change 2-1. An op-ed from the Toronto Star was titled, perhaps it's time Alberta does go it alone and says goodbye to Canada. In the article, this author raged at the Alberta Premier, Daniele Smith, for wanting to expand your own pipelines.
Jeez.
Why? Wokeness. Cultural Marxism. In other words, it's the lifeblood of your economy. You have the right to that. Not according to people in Toronto and Ottawa.
They hate you.
They wrote this. If Smith has any sensitivity to people elsewhere in Canada, including Indigenous peoples, who might object to having pipelines traversing their land, she doesn't show it.
This is the biggest issue when it comes to Canada. And I've heard this argument since Daniele Smith changed the rules on how the vote gets processed, how Alberta could raise separation. Well, there's Indigenous reserves. You can't just pack up and leave. You can't go. Again, it's like and I keep using this comparison, but it's the abusive spouse. You can't leave me. You'll be nothing without me. You have no power here. You either stay and put up with this, or you're nothing. People have constantly sent me emails. I've been tagged on Twitter. You can see it all over social media. People say, oh, there's treaties in place. There's things in place. Go and watch any interview with super lawyer Keith Wilson. He talks about, and keep in mind, he's a constitutional lawyer. He talks about the legal path to separation in Alberta and why anyone outside of Alberta that is doubting that this could happen, even those in Alberta, should really take a look at the laws and understand that they favor separation and that all it would take is for that vote to go through. It doesn't mean we need permission from the Crown. It doesn't mean that Ottawa has to say, okay, you guys can leave. All we would have to do is negotiate a deal with the United States for oil. Their military would protect Alberta borders on behalf of Alberta from Canada. Stephen Crowder gets into that later in this video in terms of there wouldn't be much of a fight. And he backs that up. I'm going to get into that so that people understand that I'm not just blowing hot air here. We're talking about legal reasons Alberta can leave. Many people bring up the reserves. They bring up all these other things. Go and watch one of the many interviews super lawyer Keith Wilson has had again. You'll see that when it comes to representation, when it comes to the laws in which Alberta could leave, a lot of people are being ignorant to those. And I'm not here to promote some kind of radicalist message that, oh, we're going, it's gone, it's this, it's that, screw Canada. I love Canada. I love my country. Albertans love Canadians. They hate their government. They hate what the government has done to their country. This isn't about the people. This isn't about hating other provinces. Stephen Crowder talks about how, in terms of representation, there wouldn't be much of a fight, especially when we talk about Canada's military. In fact, all of our military equipment is in Ukraine, isn't it? I know, a little joke there, but let's hear what Stephen has to say on this front, because it really paints the bolder picture here.
In other provinces, Toronto and Ottawa should tell you, Alberta, what you can and can't do with your energy. Oh, and by the way, we're also going to tell you where it goes. We're going to sell it at rock bottom prices to China because America bad. This seem like people who represent you? Do these seem like your countrymen? That's the country. That's the question. Canada, I want you to ask yourself, Albertans, do these people seem like your countrymen? It's a different question today than it was even 10 years ago.
That's one of the biggest points here. Absolutely, hands down. Again, Mark Carney's nowhere to be seen while all of this hysteria is going on in Alberta, while people are saying we're going to go. After Danielle Smith raised the bar and said, look, I'm not heading up anything to promote a referendum, but people have the right to vote for it, and that there's a mass movement of 30% pre-election. Nowhere to be seen. Nobody's saying anything about it. You've got Scott Moe saying, we don't promote that. We'd rather work with Canada. We don't want to have anything to do with that. I don't know why he's shooting himself in the foot with that, because the people make the choices. And Saskatchewan's going to rise up. They don't want to stay. Let's continue.
5 years ago, you basically had a referendum. You've been squeezed. Your country's becoming a catastrophe. And the rest of Canada who hates you says, yep, we want more of the same. And you can bet they are going to tighten the screws on you, Alberta, because you have not been playing ball with them.
And they're financing part of the people that are coming against them, essentially, because $20+ billion, I believe it was last year or 2 years ago, was what they basically sent out above the benefits they received from the federal government. So they're subsidizing all the rest of these people's lives to be able to do this. They'd be richer if they didn't.
Yep.
So right there, what they're talking about is the transfer payments. They're talking about the billions of dollars in transfer payments that get sent out from Alberta to have-not provinces like Quebec that are told, oh, you can, like guys like Blanchette who say, oh, we do not want pipelines in Canada. They're talking about, keep giving us your money, but we're going to give you the finger, and we're going to tell you that you can't evolve past where you are. You're not going to move. You're not going to get from underneath the government's boot. As Stephen Crowder says, they're tightening the screws. They don't care about us. So for all the people who are screaming, never going to happen, not going to happen, you're going to stay, shut up, you don't know what you're talking about, keep shoveling this under the rug and hoping that the pile doesn't get bigger. People have no idea what they voted for on Monday. The hornet's nest that's been kicked. This is real.
Not just on the tax breaks alone, just on money going out and benefits coming in.
Change subsidizing the rest of a country who can't stand you to profiting from a nation who welcomes you. So yeah, I
or
get it.
Or at least indifferent.
Yeah.
I guarantee you there would be a lot of Americans who would be very happy.
Oh, yeah.
It would be the first time that you guys had the backbone to say no. This would be the first time you actively fight something. It's different with the monarchy. Look, I know that I'm kind of insulting you here, but I'm telling you that America has a very different history. We've had to fight for this. It's different from Canada. I know that there are fights throughout history, but not to the same scale. It's your chance to do it, and you can do it without the same level of risk, without the same level of bloodshed. But I'm telling you, they will bleed this province dry. What they have been doing isn't working, and they're doing it in the name of hating your values. Which brings us to reason number 4. You do this, there really wouldn't be any resistance, just to be clear. Like the likelihood of a war, maybe it's more than 0%, but it's pretty much 0% statistically. Kind of like your chances in the United States of America as a heterosexual, monogamous male getting AIDS. It's statistically 0. Yeah. I know. It's crazy.
So what he's referencing here, and this is, again, a lot of people have said, again, I'm going to have the full video down below. Go and watch this amazing, amazing video from Steven Crowder. Normally, I always say, look, people are going to be indifferent when it comes to Crowder. You know, the whole change my mind thing. He's got great content if you're more conservative leaning. However, he makes a lot of good points here as to why Alberta needs to just say, enough, we're done, we're going. Why those who are on the fence, those who are stuck wondering, is this the best thing for Alberta? Watch this video. It will really open your eyes as to why are we sitting here? Why are we putting up with this? Why are we taking any more guff from Ottawa? What could be reached as a deal, we're not talking 51st state. And while many American viewers who watch this channel, shout out to all of our American viewers, they're awesome, by the way. They hang out in our live streams, they support the videos. I love Americans, I think they're great. But we're not talking about 51st state even. We're not talking about seceding to America. All Danielle Smith would have to do, or whoever's in charge of the province, if Alberta separates, is reach a deal with the United States for the oil they want. You can say, look, we don't have a military. We don't have anything to protect us, but we have resources. If you're going to tell me that you think the American military would go up against the United States military on Alberta borders and say, nah, you can't take that from us, we're going to go to war. How fast do you think that would end? The United States military is actually within their NATO spending targets. In fact, they're beyond the spending targets because they actually fund their military. Canada, though we're below, has still said they're going to try to speed up that process, but we're probably not going to get there till, between 2030 and 2040. Even under Mark Carney, who's going to rack up mass deficits, by the way, still. $200 billion projected. Look, I could go on and on. This video is very long. I apologize for the length of this video, but it's well worth talking about. For anybody who's getting tired of this coverage of Alberta, I'm sorry, but not sorry. This is a major thing that's now going to affect the country. And for as long as people want to hear about it, we're going to talk about it. Is it going to consume the channel? Absolutely not. We're still going to talk about Canadian political news. But in the midst of the end of this election, while this is going and while it continues to go, it's important that we talk about it because Alberta has been ignored for too long. They have been shoved to the back and told to sit at the kids' table while the adults look down upon them in great dismay. Let me know what you guys think down below. Should Alberta pull the cord? Is Steven Crowder right? Would you like to see the Fringe on Steven Crowder? I think that would be fantastic. Hopefully something can be arranged. But nonetheless, folks, make sure if this video has earned your subscription, hit that subscribe button, turn on your bell for all notifications, leave a thumbs up and a comment down below. It helps get us out on that good old YouTube algorithm. Let me know what you think down below. Please, I really want to know whether it's positive, negative. I want to hear from you. Join me live here on the channel each and every Friday night for Friday Night Fringe, our weekly live streaming show, as I'm joined by the beautiful Mrs. Fringe as we talk about everything that happened this week in politics, everything we know that's coming up in the week ahead, as well as back and forth within the greatest community on the platform. It all goes down every Friday night here at 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central on the channel. Set your watches, set your alarms, make sure you're here. Always great to see new folks in the community hanging out with us in those live streams. We do giveaways, we have memes, we have good times. It's good time to be had by all. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'll catch you on the next one.